Prime Minister Mark Carney has called for parties to return immediately to the negotiating table and for de-escalation of hostilities in the Middle East. This morning, Carney left for Brussels, where he will address issues of global security with European leaders, world leaders at the NATO summit. It comes after a busy week at home, addressing threats to Canada's economy, brought on, of course, by Donald Trump's tariffs. But after weeks of waging a trade war, Canada and the U.S. have apparently taken a step closer towards a solution. Carney and Trump have committed to reaching a trade deal by the middle of July. Kirsten Hillman is Canada's ambassador to the U.S., and she has been central to those trade talks, and she joins me live now from Washington. Ambassador, nice to see you this morning.
Good to see you. Thanks for having me.
I do want to start, just if I can quickly, but with the news that happened overnight, because obviously you were at the G7 and already Iran and Israel was sort of overshadowing those talks. Now we see the United States enter into the conflict, although they say this is just a targeted strike. How concerned are you about this potentially broadening in any way?
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously, it's a very sensitive moment. Canada has always been of the position that the Iran nuclear program is a threat to international security. The U.S. took these actions, I think, in trying to address that threat, but it does put us in, as your previous guest stated, in a delicate moment. Prime Minister Carney and the Canadian government is really urging everyone back to the table, urging de-escalation. At the same time, we're working hard to make sure that Canadians are safe in the region and know how to extract themselves. So I think it's a challenging additional factor to what was already a very, very tense situation.
Okay, I'm going to turn now to the things that you're dealing with more directly, and that's this idea that there might be a deal by, I guess the deadline is July 21st. How real is that deadline for the United States, Ambassador? It's certainly real for the Prime Minister. How real is it for the President?
Well, the President and the Prime Minister gave us that deadline in the bilateral that Minister LeBlanc and I were in with the President and the Prime Minister in Kananaskis. And the goal, it really is to get to a trade deal, as you said. So we are working nonstop, really 7 days a week on this. We've had 3 meetings since the leaders met in Kananaskis, one right there on the spot. I had a conversation with Ambassador Greer the next day, and then we had a meeting on Friday. Minister LeBlanc, Ambassador Greer, and I, with some of our experts, we're meeting again early next week. So it's, the pace is as fast as it can be. We're working as hard as we can. I hope we can get there. But Canada's in control of Canada. Canada's in control of what we do. We really can't do anything to force the U.S. side to come to a deal. But we do think we have a good path forward if we're able to take it.
It does, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, it does sound as though the Prime Minister knows that it has to be trade and defense, the economy and defense. And certainly we've heard the President talk about the Golden Dome, and there has been reports that Canada is considering what role it could play there. Is that part of the conversation, even with the USTR? Do you talk security as much as you're talking tariffs and economy?
No, we talk to USTR about trade and tariffs and the economy and the economic measures. There is discussion with the U.S. on defense and protecting our homeland, and Arctic defense in particular is something of very great interest to the U.S. administration, and we are talking to them about that. That's in a different context. And we're talking about the border. We're talking about fentanyl. We're talking about many different things that we're trying to do together. But we have different interlocutors in the U.S. for different topics. Yeah.
Okay, but this is all part of the same deal that the Prime Minister hopes to reach by July 21st.
Well, I mean, I think we're going to have to wait and see. Ultimately, the leaders focused on the trade and tariff aspects, and you will have heard that in the President's comments to the press, before the bilateral. He's really focusing in on the tariffs and the trade part, and that's what he's instructed his people to do. So that's where we're really focusing our energy right now.
The Prime Minister clearly wants the tariffs removed. It doesn't sound like that is on the table for the U.S. administration. What is your sense on whether that's possible?
I think it's too soon to tell. I think that ultimately we believe that open and stable trade are what we need for Canadian workers, for Canadian businesses. That's our goal, open and stable trade. That's what we've had. That's what's led to an enormous success for the U.S. It's made us their number one customer in manufactured goods. that the U.S. cares so much about, and also their second biggest source of FDI. So what we're trying to say is open and stable trade will lead to the prosperity and investment goals that the president has. Yeah. He likes tariffs. He's said it many, many times. So we have to find a way to demonstrate that we can achieve the same goals with the United States, Canada, through other means that don't necessarily involve these punishing tariffs, especially on strategic goods. We think that there we have a really strong case to make.
I get that, but I guess I'm trying to understand whether Canada is willing to accept the reality that some tariffs may continue, or if you're negotiating to have certain tariffs removed, understanding it'll be harder to get others removed.
You know what? These are things that are going to work themselves out in the next, number of weeks. Ultimately, our position is that we negotiated a 99% tariff-free trade environment with the Americans under NAFTA and under the USMCA, CUSMA, when we renegotiated under Trump last time. Yeah. That's our position. That's what we're fighting for.
So if there's no deal reached by July 21st, what happens? Canada walks away from the table for now? How do we know where progress is being made, I guess? And I understand you can't negotiate on television. I get that. But just so I understand what has to happen by July 21st.
Well, I think that we want to have an arrangement that is, leading Canadian businesses and Canadian workers, as I say, to a place of open trade and stability. That's the goal. And we're pushing as hard as we can to get there. I think that there is a path there. I firmly believe that. And we'll see where we get. But can I just say one thing? Yeah. The United States and our work with the United States on this is crucial right now. But what is also really important for Canada, but also, frankly, in our discussions with the U.S., is the fact that we have a number of other countries that are very eager to invest in Canada, to work with Canada to deepen ties. I saw that in Kananaskis with the G7 partners, but with the invited guests, really important. And the other thing the U.S. is taking note of is the fact that we are paying a lot of attention federally and provincially. I was at the First Minister's meeting with the Prime Minister on making sure that we are engaging in projects in Canada that lead to Canadian prosperity. All of those things, we may think that they're separate. They're not. These are conversations that the U.S. continues to want to have opportunities in Canada, continues to want to have investments in Canada, and making sure that, we're resilient by taking care of ourselves, by working with other partners while trying to get the best deal with the U.S., I think is very important.
The fact that the Prime Minister last week put more parameters around what happens to steel and aluminum. Yes, some things to help the industry, but also saying counter-tariffs will go in place if there's no deal by July 21st. How should I read that? That he believes that progress will be made, that he's willing to give the United States another chance, even though, he was elected on a promise to deal with this very quickly?
Well, I think, again, we're one side of this equation. Yeah. We can control what we do. We can put our best foot forward. For the counter-tariffs, what the Prime Minister has said is that they will be adjusted. They will be adjusted up. They could be adjusted down. I mean, it depends on where we're at. I think that's really important. I think it's very important for Canada to show strength and resolve at that negotiating table. Yeah. We are the U.S.'s best customer. They do need us. Regardless of what we might hear the President say from time to time, they need us for resilience. They need us for their energy proposition. They need us to help them counter behaviors of China on the world stage that are suppressing world markets. They need us. And I think that we are in the process of making sure, in a very granular level, that the administration understands that. So hopefully that will help move the conversation along.
So just so I'm clear, this week, there are more meetings this week. You expect to lean in over the next few weeks, I would imagine.
Yes, so we have meetings set up this week, starting early this week coming up, and carrying on throughout the week,
Okay. Ambassador Hillman, always nice of you to make the time. I appreciate you doing this on a Sunday morning. Thank you.
All right, thanks for having me.
Okay.
Bye.